It's not progressing at all. What happens with most of the jazz musicians, and you listen to them, they rise to a level, and that's why when I get in the studio, I'm a son of a bitch. I mean, don't listen. I don't take anything for granted, and I don't take any lip from anybody. I know that if you go up here, that most of the jazz musicians or musicians will get to a level and feel comfortable, and that's what they're going to do. There's nothing wrong with that. But what I want them to do is to rise above that. But it takes a hell of a lot of guts to sit there and tell them, that there's something beyond that, and they could be a little freer, and not as contained. I mean, if you're going to worry about, if I could get to the keyboard, worry about the chords and everything else, you're lost. You're dead. You're dead in the water. I mean, look at all the great artists that have done that, and they have moved this music forward. The bebop moved it, maybe 20 years forward. But after that, it started to regress. I mean, and everybody now wants to be a bebop player, but not everybody can be a bebop player. And I try to tell them that, go beyond that. Take another step up the ladder. 2 or 3 steps. Because when I was playing, I was trying to destroy the blues. People say, "Are you crazy?" I mean, I said, I don't want the 12 bars in my head all the time. I mean, you listen to the radio, you listen to the movie, what do you hear? The 12 bar, the 12 bar, the 12 bars, the 12 bar. And they put all kinds of nonsense stuff above it, below it, whatever. Now, you could take the 12 bars and say, okay, I got the 12 bars, but manipulate the 12 bars so that you go somewhere. You just don't go from the tonic to the subdominant, back to the tonic, to the dominant, back to the fourth, and then I mean, what you do, you go to the tonic, maybe to an E flat, and maybe to an A major, and then before you get back, you're into another, and then don't extend it, and then change the meter. How many people have ever changed the meter in the track? I mean, we did it many times in the past, but you can be do 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 dun dit dun dit dun dit dun do 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 dun dit dun dit dun dit. To create the excitement, but they don't do that. I mean, they just go da 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 da, which is nice. It's groove. I like the groove, but then it would be 1 2 3 dun dit dun dit ba da 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 ba da 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 da. That means you create the emotion, so it's just like, listening to a piece of Schubert. You don't hear Schubert doing the same thing. He's all over the place. I mean, rhythmically, not so much, but harmonically, he moves. I mean, and that's what I try to do harmonically, because I know that it's very difficult to do the things that I want them to do, in a short period of time, so you make it easy for them. I love classical music. I studied Schoenberg, I studied Bartok, the 12-tone technique, Webern. I mean, I'm a freak for tonalities and seeing what they do, and I'm recently studying the Bartok string quartets. I mean, it was when I was working on this thing I was working on a string quartet, and I was saying, gee, I just would like to look. I just pulled out the score of the 6 string quartets by Bartok, and I saw at a glance the mind at work, and it was really wonderful to see. And I said, geez, I could try this, and maybe try what he did plus something else, and I did. But I'm a freak for classical music. I love great things. I mean, I studied it when I was at Juilliard for 4 years, and that was enough. Because when I went there, I didn't know anything about classical. I didn't even know what a trio was. I remember they said, well, what is a trio? I said, well, is it 3 musicians? And it was the wrong answer. A trio. It's like with different movements. And I remember that when somebody asked me that question, I think it was for the entrance exam. That's before I changed my major from diploma to, from diploma to degree. But then I studied very hard. I studied privately, for 4 years at Juilliard, and I studied privately after I left Juilliard with a great composer. In fact, this piece that I told you about, which was called Areas, is now the foundation for this teacher. That's all he does now is does aerial kind of pieces with maybe 15 orchestras, 40 trombones, 8 barges with musicians on 8 different barges, cacophony. I mean, this is, now, after he heard this piece of Areas where I split up the orchestra, I was studying with him at the time, and he was a teacher there, and I became his assistant in his class. That's the only kind of music he writes, is aerials. He writes, Jesus, he just won the Pulitzer Prize this past year. His name is Henry Brandt. I don't know if you know Henry, but I love good classical music, but there's nothing being done. Nobody's recording anything new. And I used to have all of those records, and I had all the scores, because when in doubt, I would buy the score, study the score, and my greatest pleasure is to sit home and put one of these classical records on of Stravinsky or whatever, and look at the score and study that. And I would try to conduct some of that stuff. And I studied conducting when I was at Juilliard. Now I can't conduct unless I sit and conduct, which is very hard for me to do because I get emotional. And I think that a student who's in music should learn how to conduct, should learn how to be able to take over a band and tell the players, this is what I want. You know, I remember doing this when I was 14. And Jesus, at 14, I had some top-notch guys in the band in upstate New York. I mean, they were much older than me. They were in their 20s. But this is what you got. And we used to play for dances. Gave a concert when I was 14 with a big band up at my high school. So, you know, but I like all kinds of music. I mean, I write operas. I've written some operas. I've written all kinds of banjo music. Done string pieces galore. Jesus Christ, I've done so many string pieces. I did a big ballet for the San Antonio, I don't know, exposition. This is about 5, 6, 7 years ago, where I wrote this piece, and it was done. It was done here in New York later, but it was premiered in San Antonio, and it's all, the scores are this big. I mean, and people say, you write all those notes? I said, yeah. I said, yes. And I did a piece with Leonard Bernstein, which was kind of interesting because when I was working with him, he said, do you have any music you'd like me to look at? I said, yeah, I got a couple of pieces. And I showed him 2 pieces. He said, which one do you want to do? We'll do it with the New York Philharmonic, you know, this season, and it'll be 3 performances. I said, look, how about this piece, this sort of like an antiphonal piece for jazz quintet and the symphony orchestra. I said, but we have to put the quintet in the balcony. He said, no, can't do that. And I said, the parts are completely improvised. He said, no. So I said, okay, you tell me what you want me to do. He said, I want you to put the band on stage, and I want you to write the parts out. Write a new score. I said, how the hell do I do this? Now, these parts were all written, but it was supposed to be improvised because the original performance was at Columbia University many years ago. So what I did, put the band on stage on the risers, and then I conducted the small band on my knees. I mean, I can't get on my knees now, otherwise I won't be able to get up. And I'm conducting these guys, and we had Art Farmer, we had John LaPorta, I can't think of who else, and Shaughnessy on drums. It was a hell of a band, but I wrote a thing, and I was just saying earlier, you take the texture, even with Miles' and stuff, you know, maybe that's where, this was in 1957, I think it was, and I took and I wrote the parts, so there are no bar lines. There are no bar lines in the score for the orchestra. And so Lenny really had to be on top of it. I mean, as he was going through it, he said, there would be, the strings started it, then the woodwinds would come in, no bar lines. The percussion would come in, no bar lines. And I'd tell him, I point, because I didn't write a new score, I would just point where the jazz band would come in, and I gave a separate score for the parts, for what they were playing. And it proved very successful. I've got this on tape, and it's a hell of a performance. And you hear all these things, you don't know quite if was it saxophone player, what the hell is his name? Benny Golson. He tells the story. If you ever see him, ask him about this story. He was driving along, all of a sudden he heard the broadcast. He almost ran off the road. He pulled off the road and he stopped his car. He said, "What the hell? What is that? Something wrong with the radio?" And it was Bernstein playing a thing called fusion. And it was meshing of all these elements together. I mean, that's why looking forward, I mean, Lenny made me do it. I mean, and I didn't really want to, but I had to. And then we did 3 performances, and I'm on my knees. We got pictures of all of this. It was very fun. And I'm trying to conduct it. And then one day, it was a hell of a record. And then I later did it with the London Philharmonic. I did the track in London, myself conducting, and then I got the Lounge Lizards. You know, and I took them in the studio, and I've got a whole tape of the Lounge Lizards. It's the greatest thing they ever did. He won't put them out, and I'm not going to give it back to him until he puts it out. It is the greatest album he ever made. And at the same time, I made the track, and the track is the way I wanted it done originally, improvised. And so their track, I mean, I gave them a little clue as to what to do, but the track is all improvised. And it's on a record, and I have that. I mean, I have both versions, so you can hear the original as opposed to hearing the one I did with the Lounge Lizards. I mean, and then I did a concert with them up in Canada at Quebec, with the Quebec Symphony. I got them on the program. They called me up and wanted me to come up and conduct the orchestra. And I said, well, if I could get the Lounge Lizards to do a little part of the program, I will write a new piece for them, and we'll do the concert. We did all the music. We had 8,000 people there a night in the summertime. 8,000. I mean, I couldn't draw flies here in New York. I mean, forget it. You couldn't get 3 people to come and hear you play. But and they wouldn't let us off the stand. And I wrote a piece for his brother, and it's only 2 pages long, and it's all like this sort of ad lib. And I said, look, what you do now, you start playing. I will bring in the orchestra, and I will listen to you, and when the element is right, the percussion will come in. When the element is right, and the score is only, I think the string parts are 12 bars. The trumpet parts is 2 bars. The woodwinds are 2 bars. And the percussion, I think, is maybe 8 bars. And then there was one other. But when I did it, I listened to him, what he was doing. And he would get more excited. I would bring in the trumpet, and I would repeat them, you know. And I had 2. They were all done with cues, 1, 2, 3, 4, you know. And then and the 5th one did the whole orchestra, and it's a hell of a noisemaker. I mean, they wouldn't even let us off the stage, I tell you. And we got a great review for 2 days.